Yes, that's right. In today's video, I will be playing through 300 Days of Stardew Valley Expanded. This is of course a continuation of my previous 2 expanded videos, so if you haven't seen the first 100 or 200 days, make sure to go and check them out. My goals for the next 100 days are to buy all 4 obelisks from the wizard, complete the monster slayer goals, unlock and explore the highlands, fill my farm full of pigs and start a truffle empire, and upgrade all of my tools to iridium. These videos do take a long time to put together, so if you do enjoy, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. That way I know you're enjoying them and I can keep making more. Speaking of videos, let's get right into this one. I was back on the farm day 201. The snow was falling and I got to reacquainting myself with the farm. I said hello to my animal friends who I hadn't seen in a while, passed by Grandpa's shed which was now full to the brim of ancient fruit, and shoved some iridium into my furnaces. It's good to be back. I hitched a ride into town with Sally and made my way over to Clint's. However, I picked the one day that he wasn't there, so that's a great start. Instead, I packed a slingshot and took a boat ride over to Ginger Island where I shot down this golden walnut which was stuck in a tree. On the west side of the island, I walked over to Mr. Key's walnut door. I'm hoping to unlock the door soon, and with only 8 walnuts left to get before he would let me in, it was looking pretty promising. Back in the valley, I tended to my slime hutch before turning in for the night. With my first day back on the farm over with, it was on to day 202. Today, I wasn't going to miss my opportunity at Clint's, so I filled my boots with snow as I waited for him to open, which I love, by the way. Once inside, I put my axe in for an iridium upgrade before riding with Sally up to the mines. I slapped on some of that new Gucci Monster Musk cologne and got to work. You see, one of the monster slayer goals I need is void spirits, and with Monster Musk increasing the amount of monsters that spawn on each level, it was the perfect way to achieve that goal. So I spent the rest of the day doing just that. As it was getting late, I knocked off the last one and finished the monster slayer goal. On my way back home, Linus and I got up to some interesting things in his tent. Oh, okay, he was just showing me how to craft a wild bait. I really thought something else was going on there. Anyway, I made it back home, dumped my inventory into my chest, and finally headed to bed. Day 203 started with a trip through my Nexus to Sprite Spring. I had some comments from the 200 days video that there was a secret area behind the waterfall. And would you look at that? I didn't even know you could swim in the spring, let alone find a secret area, so thank you to those who let me know. I did try fishing to see if there were any secrets, but all I got was trash. I traveled back through the ancient grove and continued on into town where I handed Caroline a summer spangle, since it was her birthday today. She also showed me the power of green tea, which went about as you'd expect. Trying to get as far away from that as I could, I decided to head to Ginger Island where I planted a whole bunch of taro by the river, mainly for the golden walnuts you get for farming. Unfortunately, you can't get them from regrowable crops like my ancient fruit, and I'd need taro for the shipping collection anyway. So really it was 2 birds with 1 stone. Back on the farm that evening, I didn't achieve all too much, so on to day 204. It was the Festival of Ice today. However, before I could go and join, my winter seeds had produced their forageables. So after picking them all and turning them back into seeds and replanting them all, I headed on down to the festival. As an expert fisherman now, I demolished everyone at the fishing game. I mean, come on, Willie, you really call yourself an experienced fisher? My friend, you should be embarrassed. Back on the farm that night before bed, I collected up my ancient fruit wine from the shed and shipped it off for lots of that wonderful gold. I started day 205 with some ancient fruit picking. However, this time it wasn't just my greenhouse full of fruit. The ancient fruit in my shed had grown too, so I went along and collected them all up. Afterwards, I shoved them all into my kegs. As for the excess ancient fruit, I shipped them off for some extra cash. I do plan to expand my ancient fruit wine empire at some point, just not today. For now though, I found myself back at Clint's picking up my iridium axe and swapping it out for an iridium pickaxe upgrade. That afternoon, Sally and I rode up to the Adventurers Guild where I gifted Marlin a slime egg before heading to the movie theater. I jumped onto the crane game and played until I had Junimo plushies coming out of my ears. I took my 8 toys and 1 movie poster home where I left them inside for safekeeping. And then I spent the rest of the night smelting ores. Day 206 started with a trip back to the movie theater, this time to hand Claire a sunflower. And then it was off to Piers to purchase his catalogue and Robin's to get her her furniture catalogue along with a bunch of wood. While I was there, I painted my shed since it was looking a bit boring compared to my other buildings. And back on the farm, I put the wood to good use by making a whole lot of kegs. I had decided the shed would be much more useful as another keg shed to make more wine, and I'd find another space for the jadestone crystallariums and oil makers at another time. In town, I passed by the special quest board where I picked up Caroline's Island Ingredients quest, which I definitely don't forget about. I quickly popped over to Ginger Island to hand Sebastian a void egg for his birthday before returning to the valley. I then spent the rest of day 206 to halfway through day 208 interior decorating. The only other important thing that happened was on day 207, I swapped out my iridium pickaxe for an iridium hoe upgrade. But apart from that, I spent these days slowly but surely decorating my farmhouse. And by day 208, I was stoked with how it was coming along. All I had left was one room. I wasn't too sure what I wanted to do with it. That afternoon on day 208, I paid Lewis a visit where I closed my eyes and spent 250,000 gold on the farm extension I had agreed to do at the end of the last 200 days. Watching all of that gold slip away like that brought a tear to my eye, but I had a feeling it would be worth it. That evening, I passed the time chopping up stumps for hardwood, tending to my slime hutch, and gifting Marlin another slime egg before calling it in for the night. Mayor Lewis popped by the morning of day 209 to let me know that my farm expansion application had been approved and will be cleared by tomorrow. Very exciting stuff. Down at Willie's, I paid for a ticket and travelled on over to Ginger Island. I found another gem bird on the north side of the island, so I took the gem and placed it on its pedestal. Just outside the Pirate's Cove, a mermaid sat atop a rock waiting for someone to play her some beautiful music. And what better person to do that than me? I tuned the flute blocks, I played her a melody, and I was rewarded with some golden walnuts. With 2 gems already placed on the pedestals from the gem birds, I quickly circled back to the valley, picked up a bunch of gems, and headed back to the island where I played a guessing game of what gem goes where. Luckily, I got it first try and got my hands on 5 more golden walnuts. I mooched my way through the rain and on over to Mr. Key's walnut room, who finally let me in. In this room, I can check my perfection status, accept difficult challenges, and spend key gems I get from completing said challenges on in-game items. But I think I'll come back another day. For now though, I walked back to the valley where I got some much needed rest. My farm had gotten a little bigger on day 210. Did they do that overnight when I was sleeping? Or, you know what, never mind. I was very excited to have some extra space on the farm though. Sally and I ventured into town where I stopped by Clint's to swap out my iridium hoe for an iridium watering can upgrade, and I quickly paid Harvey's clinic a visit to hand him a truffle oil, as it was his birthday today. Then back on the farm, I spent the rest of the day making use of my new farm extension. I added a pathway to the new farm entrance and made an area for where my 4 obelisks will go. Since I placed my slime hutch where I was originally going to put them, this was probably the next best spot. Day 211 started with picking my winter seeds, turning them back into seeds, and replanting them all, which now filled up my entire crop area. And since I didn't have my watering can, a few are going to grow a day later, which totally doesn't annoy me whatsoever. I love when things grow at the exact same time and they look really dumb when they're at different stages of being ready. Anyway, I spent some time finishing off my obelisk area by adding some brick and stone braziers, and it's looking very nice. Later that evening, the night market had arrived down at the beach, so I took a quick look around before heading in to watch the mermaid show. I may have gotten a pearl from a secret note, but I'll never get that show out of my head anytime soon. It was a Monday night, so of course, before bed, I stayed up collecting my ancient fruit wine and shipped it off. Which of course meant I started day 212 picking my ancient fruit and shoving them into kegs. I even got to make use of my new keg shed. I quickly popped over to Ginger Island where I used some walnuts to unlock the island trader before heading back to the valley. And I spent the rest of the day cleaning out my slime hutch, gifting Marlin another slime egg, and collecting up some oak resin before heading to sleep. Day 213 I headed over to Clint's where I waited ever so patiently in the freezing cold to collect my iridium watering can, which now ticks off one of my goals. I then popped by Robin's where I commissioned my first of 2 sheds to be placed just below my obelisks. Remember how I said I'd find space for all of my jadestone and oil makers? Well, I found it. Down in the Cindersap forest, I found Krobus milling about the entry of the Junimo forest, where he seemed to be enjoying some company. I found him back in the sewer, where he explained to me that he can sneak there from the southern sewer pipe, and that the Junimos from the village love him. Which is actually quite lovely. That afternoon, I got myself comfy just outside of Andy's farm and tried fishing for one of the 5 legendary fish. This one only spawns in winter, and in no time at all, I had caught myself the glacier fish. Back home, I put it into a big fish tank I had prepared earlier, but but it was looking a little empty. So I went back down into the sewers where I cast my rod into the green sewer water and fished up the mutant carp, my second legendary fish. I added it to the fish tank along with some seaweed, stone, and a couple of sea urchins, and it was really coming together. Day 214 was a max luck day, and when I have a max luck day, I like to hit the skull cabins for resources. So I gathered up some bombs from the dwarf and waited patiently outside Pam's trailer to hurry her up. Okay, it's past 8:30. Pam, you can come out now. Pam? Oh my god, you've got to be kidding me. Oh god, this is so stupid. I have a max luck day. Why can't Pam just come out? Well, since there's no way of getting to the desert today, I decided the next best thing would be to use that luck in the volcano dungeon. I did manage to dig up another golden walnut and an ostrich egg. So hey, that's cool. While I was making my way through the dungeon, I was on the lookout for more golden walnuts, cinder shards, and dragon teeth. You see, I need 15 dragon teeth, 10 to go towards the island obelisk, and 5 to buy a banana sapling from the island trader, of which I need 10 for the island obelisk as well. I spent all day making my way through the dungeon and made it back to the island house just in time for bed. I started day 215 picking my taro in the pouring rain, which to be honest was quite a nice change of pace from the fiery inferno of the volcano dungeon. Back in the valley, I rode Sally up to Robin's where I commissioned the second shed to be built under my obelisk area. Continuing on from there, I found Marlin watching the snowfall where I handed him another slime egg, which put him at max hearts. I've been giving Marlin so many gifts recently because he has this boat I can't access without his permission, and I want on it. To finish the day off, I chopped some stumps down in the cindersap forest for hardwood before heading to sleep. It was day 216 and Evelyn's birthday, so I headed on over to her house to give her a fairy rose flower. Down at the beach, I did some foraging before taking a boat ride over to Ginger Island. I then spent the rest of day 216 and day 217 scouring the volcano dungeon for any goodies I could get my hands on. The only other important thing to note is that on day 217, I commissioned a big shed upgrade from Robin's, which leads us on to day 218. Checking the TV again, I saw it was another max luck day, so I gathered my bombs, took off to Sophia's to buy an H bottle of Blue Moon wine for +7 luck, and waited outside for Pam to show up. She's not coming out, is she? As I was riding back through town, I realized it was community day today, so I guess that's bad timing on my part, to be fair. Since my plans for the Skull Cavern run had been shattered yet again, I decided a good use of my time would be spent over on the island farm. Since I was going to turn all of my ancient fruit into seeds, I thought I might as well make it look good. So that's exactly what I did. I added wooden planks around the outside, wooden paths to the little bridges, and used my new and improved hoe to prepare the ground for tomorrow. By the time it was getting late, I quickly made a whole bunch of deluxe speed grow with coral and oak resin I had stored away, and a lot of grass starter with my fiber. Just before bed, I collected my ancient fruit wine and shipped it off before passing out, right in front of my house. I'm surprised I didn't get hypothermia, to be fair. Day 219 was a big day full of picking ancient fruit and replanting them on Ginger Island. Luckily, when I got there, it was raining, meaning any soil I needed to hoe would be watered for me. I then got to seed making. In between batches of seeds being ready, I would go and fill a section of land with the deluxe speed grow and come back to collect the seeds, which I kept on repeating until I had enough seeds to fill up the island farm. By 8 PM, I had finally filled the island farm full of ancient fruit, and my ancient fruit wine empire was that much closer to being complete. To finish the day off, I headed back to the valley where I managed to catch Leah hanging out in the saloon, and I gave her a goat's cheese as it was her birthday today. She then paid me a visit the next morning on day 220 to hand me a sculpture she had made just for me. Oh, isn't that just wonderful? I spent a good part of the morning picking all of my winter forageables, turning them back into seeds, and replanting them back into my crop area. Now I know they'll die as spring rolls around, but I won't have to worry about hoeing and watering a whole bunch of land when the seasons change, so hey, that's fine by me. I then did some chores around the farm before taking Willie's boat over to Ginger Island again. Over on the island farm, I finished up laying a whole bunch of grass since I want to minimize the chance of weeds growing and ruining my fields of ancient fruit. And then returning to the chill of the valley, I rode Sally up to Robin's to commission the second big shed upgrade before heading home to do some chores on the farm. Day 221 was Feast of the Winter Star. You know, one of these days I'll get it right. I joined the festivities in town where I handed Willie a rabbit's foot as I was a secret gift giver. Clint was my gift giver this year and he gave me Okay, that's definitely one of the better gifts I've gotten, so hey, I'm not complaining. Speaking of Clint, day 222 was his birthday, so I repaid the favor by giving him a ruby. Sally and I passed by the beach to do some foraging before venturing all the way to the summit where I picked some thistle and winter star roses. I continued my foraging adventure through my nexus to Sprite Spring where I picked some more flowers and headed through the waterfall to forage in the hidden cave. Back on the farm that evening, I didn't achieve too much, so I just called it an early night. Day 223 started off with a trip to Blue Moon Vineyard where I handed Sophia a fairy rose for her birthday. And then my Skull Cavern wishes came true. It was a good luck day and Pam was back to driving the bus, so I gathered my bombs and aged Blue Moon wine and headed to the desert. Before entering the caverns, I downed the wine for my luck boost and headed inside. I spent all day diving through the caverns and ended up with 189 iridium ore, 2 prismatic shards, and a whole lot of other goodies before passing out at 2 AM. Day 224 was the final day of winter and the last day of year 2. I took the minecarts over to Clint's where I purchased a ton of coal since I was running low, and I found Sophia in the town square looking a bit down. So I offered to pat Dusty with her and she seemed to enjoy that. Sally and I quickly rode up to Robin's where I painted my 2 sheds. The first I painted green as this one will have the Jadestone Crystallariums, and the second one I painted yellow since it'll house all of my oil makers. Back on the farm I spent the rest of the day smelting iron and copper into bars, and that's because I'm gonna need quite a lot to meet the ancient fruit quota I now have on my island farm. And just before bed I added 83 kegs to the shed, which completely filled it out. Overnight Grandpa came and visited me in my slumber and told me he was very proud of the work I'd done to the farm. And you bet I was ready to kick into year 3. Welcome back to spring. It was day 225 and my crop fields were full of dead plants. However, I won't scythe them away until the egg festival when I splash out on a whole bunch of strawberry seeds, since I did all of my crop growing last year. Behind the waterfall, Grandpa had left me with a special surprise in the form of a statue of perfection. These give me between 2 and 8 iridium daily, so I decided to put it inside where I walk past it every day. Afterwards, I did some chores around the farm before continuing work on the farmhouse interior. I decided I want this corner room to be a gaming room. I'll fill it with more movie posters and arcade machines at some point, but I was excited at the prospect of it. In between my animal areas, I continued my decorating by adding some benches and decorative pines to the lamps, and it was looking very nice. I then rode Sally into town and past the special quest board where I picked up Willy's Tropical Fish quest. If that sounds familiar, then you'd be correct. In the 200 days, I was a little unsuccessful in completing this quest. I thought what better time to try and catch some tropical fish and complete Willy's quest. Well, it turns out the answer to that was 5 days ago because I had a horrible time trying to catch anything in the river, and I'm hoping this time will be different. Sally and I headed north to the summit where I picked a new flower called the Ferngill Primrose before heading back to the farm and calling it in for the night. Day 226 was another Tuesday, so I spent the morning picking all of my ancient fruit and shoving them into kegs. I then quickly popped by Clint's to get some more coal since I used up most of it smelting ores a couple of days ago. That afternoon I took the boat across to Ginger Island and I got stuck in trying to complete Willy's special quest. Now before you ask, yes, the grass looks like it's still in winter, but it does fix itself, I promise. For the rest of the day, I stood in the rain fishing. I managed to hook 5 blue discus from the river and 5 lionfish from the ocean. I even managed to catch 2 new fish, a sea sponge and a lunaloo. And on day 227, I started my day over in the Pirates Cove, finishing off Willy's quest by catching 5 stingray. You know, without all the pirates here, it's actually kind of creepy. Anyway, I was fishing for quite a while, and when I finally made it back to the valley that afternoon, Magnus was waiting at my door. He was here to let me know that he was taking in a new student. Does that mean we'll have another friend in the valley? We'll just have to wait and see. To finish up the day, I spent my evening doing some chores around the farm. Day 228, I rode down to the wizard's tower to see if his new student had arrived, and upon entering, I met a new friend called Morgan. He seems fun, although Magnus told him off for using magic, so I didn't see him for too long. So I left before I got Morgan into more trouble. Today was also Kent's birthday, so I quickly popped on over to Ginger Island to give him a bowl of roasted hazelnuts. Back home, I decided to add some more pizzazz to my 2 new sheds by adding a pathway, some wooden walkways, fences, and torches. And my farm expansion was starting to prove its value. Day 229 I spent in the volcano dungeon looking for more resources. I managed to get 4 teeth today though, so hey, that's pretty good. But yeah, that's about all I did today. Overnight though, Don gave birth to a baby pig who I called John, because of course I did. Day 230 I started my day with a trip into the road tunnel. I snuck a battery into the lockbox and started the Curious Mr. Key questline. But instead of continuing the quest like a normal person, I spent the rest of the day foraging, chopping up stumps for hardwood, and doing chores on the farm. Man, I get so easily distracted in this game. I took a trip to the Junimo village the morning of day 231 so that I could purchase some deluxe retaining soil, and you'll see why I bought it very soon. But for now, Sally and I rode into town to celebrate our very own Mayor Lewis's birthday by giving him a hot pepper. And then I hopped on over to Ginger Island. On the farm, I replaced an iridium sprinkler and finally planted my ancient fern seeds and shrub seeds. Yeah, remember when I got them ages ago during the 200 days? Well, I finally remembered to plant them. And then I put my 10 deluxe retaining soil down, where I planted 10 pineapple seeds. Afterwards, I filled up the island with more grass so that the chance of weeds growing was close to none. Also, having deluxe retaining soil means I won't ever have to water those pineapples again, which is great. Back in the valley, I continued on with the Curious Mr. Key quest by throwing a rainbow shell up into the box at the railway. I received the next part of the quest, which was to put 10 beets in Mayor Lewis's fridge. So I took off on a bus ride to the desert where I bought some beet seeds from Sandy, but with no space to plant them, I'll have to wait until my ancient fern seeds and shrub seeds are done growing to plant them. So the quest for now was put on hold. Day 232, the rain was pouring down and it was also thundering. So in order to get a heap of batteries, I used a rain totem to ensure it would thunder again tomorrow. And you know what, I do this quite a few times actually, so it'll be raining for the next few days. I then traveled through my nexus to Galdora. Yes, Galdora, not Gladora, like I said last time, I got it wrong. I was here in Galdora to give Lance a birthday gift. Good thing I kept a hold of his schedule so I could find him. Back in the valley, I was passing through town and found Sophia looking a bit down, but she ran off before I could say anything. I was, however, on my way to catch a legend. The legend, I may add. Since it was raining, I had the perfect chance to catch my 3rd legendary fish. So I got comfy up at the mountain lake and started casting. It took me a few tries, but I managed to hook one, and I battled back and forth with it for a while. But after the struggle, I had caught it on my first attempt. Not too shabby, considering in my last series it took me like 5 attempts. And back home I put my fish into my fish tank with the other 2. Up at the railway I found Marlon paying his respects to his fallen guild members in the rain, and he invited me to join his meetings that he and Magnus have, to which I said I'd love to join. Before bed I was back on the farm collecting up all of my ancient fruit wine and dumping it all into the shipping bin. Marlon paid me a visit the morning of day 233 who wanted to discuss something with me up at the guild. Sounds interesting. However, before I go, it was of course another Tuesday, so after picking all of my ancient fruit and shoving them back into kegs, I took the minecart up to the guild. Obviously, I had jumped the gun because I was waiting in the pouring rain. But once I was let in, Marlon told me about an outpost Lance has in the Highlands. He was willing to let me use his boat to get there, however I needed to do something for him in return. What was that, you may ask? Well, it's a whole lot of monster loot. 100 Void Essence, 80 Solar Essence, 5 Slime, 40 Bat Wings, and 30 Bug Meat. Luckily for me though, I'm quite the hoarder, so I already had everything in my chests. I gathered up all the stuff I needed and hauled it back to the guild where I handed it all over to Marlon. For the rest of the night, I kinda just fluffed around the farm not doing too much, to be honest. Marlon was back the morning of day 234, letting me know that the boat was ready to set sail. I quickly passed by town where I handed Vincent a bunch of grapes for his birthday, and full of excitement I headed up to the dock. Marlon and I set sail on his boat, venturing through canyons and past beautiful waterfalls, and we finally docked just outside the outpost. We found Lance outside, who ushered us inside to discuss some important matters. He explained to me that beyond the confinements of the outpost were monsters who hold peculiar seeds with abnormal arcane properties. My goal was to obtain 4 different seed types, grow them, and return them to Lance. So my adventure began. Over days 234 and 235, I explored the vast highlands area. I started out by finding a path that led up to a winding mountain, and after making my way through hordes of never-ending monsters, I found my way to the top where I encountered a boss battle. This Pepper Rex definitely didn't go down easy, and the endless swarm of monsters certainly wasn't helping. But after a hard and long-fought battle, the Rex was slain, and I was rewarded with a treasure and a golden key. While climbing down the mountain, I had noticed a huge cave entrance, so that's exactly where I headed next. The further I adventured through the cave, the greater the enemy's numbers grew. I was pretty much running through blind, but I managed to find a narrow path that led up to a dwarf who had been locked away in a cage. Turns out the key I had obtained from the Pepper Rex had been for this very cage, and I was able to set the dwarf free. I explored the cave a little bit more, but with the amount of enemies, I ran for the exit and made it out in one piece. Once out in the fresh air again, I stumbled across a large area surrounding a lake, and took my sword to slay the monsters that surrounded the area. By the end of the day, I had also managed to obtain all 4 seed types, which I'll have to plant sometime soon. So I think it's safe to say I had completed another goal. Looking for a change of pace on day 236, I reserved today for your favorite segment of all time. Yes, that's right. It's time for Panning with Poxeel! Panning with Poxeel is a game where I pan for the elusive lucky ring. Currently, I have obtained 2 this series and I want to keep adding to my collection. So I spent the day here, but unfortunately, I wasn't able to add another to the tally. Day 237 was the Festival of Eggs, so I finally scythed down my dead plants and headed into town. I went straight to Pierre's stall and got myself 999 strawberry seeds. Hey, you can never have too many strawberry seeds. And then I started up the egg hunt. This year went pretty well. I managed to get 8 eggs, which is pretty good, right? Let's see who won. I really don't want to talk about it. Day 238 was Pig Day. That's right, I finally bought all 48 pigs today. From all of your comments from the first 100 days, I managed to pick out 48 random names, and they are as follows. Coron, Megan Shannon, Mystery Mo, Cat Grace, White Wolf 957, Amber Sparks, EJ Kim, Thirsty Boy, Nala, Julia, Pumpkin Boyo, Sarah R, Bellamoo, Thini Bobini, Jacob Alpert, Pigpen, Grace, Chickadee, Marco Diaz, Nate Adam, Llama Queen, Zin Zin, Spartan 0086, That Blackwing, 4 Muffinteers, Rainbow, Skid Dog, Elden Drink, Levi Owens, EJ, Alan Carlo, Janko, Gemini Dragon, Ham Famlet, Olivia Parr, Kind Kana, MJ, Blue Blood, Winter, Moonman, Kit Kat Katie, Sammy23, Makala Akalum, Booth76, Zappo, Terra13, She Wonders, and Sprox. Woo! That's a lot of pigs. Some names were too long, so I had to shorten them, but there you have it. Another goal done. Sally and I rode into town to hand Haley a sunflower for her birthday before adding a first lot of oil makers to my shed. I spent the rest of the day completing odd jobs, doing chores, and I made the hard decision to sell Ron, Don, and John since I had a whole pen of pigs now. You will be missed. Day 239, I headed on over to the Volcano Dungeon for the day. While I was there, I managed to complete the Magma Sprite Monster Slayer goal and get my hands on 3 more Dragon Teeth. That afternoon, I returned to the island with a chocolate cake to hand to Olivia since it was her birthday today, before heading home to collect and ship away my ancient fruit wine. Continuing routine on day 240, I was getting ready to pick all of my ancient fruit. However, all of my Ginger Island crop had finished growing, so I started there. Then back in the valley, I finished picking all of my fruit before shoving them into my kegs. The time had honestly flown by today, so I rode Sally mindlessly around the farm, thinking about how I could use the rest of my farmland. I concluded that I'll get another keg shed since I had so much excess fruit left over from the harvest today. I started day 241 with some chores around the farm and saying hello to all of my pigs, who were smartly staying inside out of the rain. I took a boat ride over to Ginger Island, where I popped by the island trader to trade in some dragon teeth and mussels to get a mango and banana tree sapling. Back in the valley, I circled around to Robbins and commissioned that second keg shed I had talked about yesterday. And back on the farm, I planted down my 2 new trees in the greenhouse. As it got late, I rode Sally around collecting any forage I could find before heading to sleep. If you hadn't noticed yet, it's still raining and thundering on day 242. Those rain totems are working a treat, and my battery collection was looking way better for it. Today was Pam's birthday, so I found her walking through town where I handed her a cactus fruit. And then I popped over to Ginger Island, where I spent the rest of the day back in the sweltering depths of the Volcano Dungeon, this time leaving with 3 more dragon teeth. Day 243, the sun was out and shining once again. I collected another batch of batteries and said hello to my 48 pigs, then Sally and I paid a visit to Robin. I splashed some cash on a few stacks of wood and stone and commissioned a big shit upgrade. Back on the farm, I put some of that stone to use by crafting 18 crystallariums. I placed them in my shed and filled them all with jadestone. If you are sitting there wondering why jadestone, it's because the desert trader trades 1 jadestone for 1 staircase on a Sunday, and staircases make some of the later game challenges challenges a lot easier. Trust me, I highly recommend having your own jadestone shed. I then spent the rest of day 243 and 244 smelting ores. A new keg shed requires 138 kegs, which is 138 bars of copper and iron. So it was safe to say I took a while to smelt it all. 2 whole days, in fact. I also gave Shane a hot pepper for his birthday. Even the grouchy alcoholic deserves a birthday gift. Day 245, I woke up to the wonderful sound of Junimos picking my strawberries for me. I said good morning to my piggies, chopped down some hardwood in the secret woods, and did some foraging at Sprite Spring and up at the summit. On the way back through, I popped into Robin's to paint my keg shed the same colours as my other one, and bought 4 stacks of wood. I bet you can see where this is going. Back on the farm, I gathered up my oak resin, bars of copper and iron, and I made 138 kegs. After making the front of the shed the same as the other 2, I got to placing down my kegs. Now, isn't that just the most satisfying thing you've ever seen? As the evening went on, I placed some pathways down to the shed and added some grass and headed to sleep. Day 246, I was back to decorating, more specifically the last section of my farm expansion. I didn't have much use for the rest of the land, so around the pond I added some stone paths, trees, seats, a campfire, and grass, and I'm loving it. I'm sure when the trees grow in, it'll look even better. That afternoon, I took Marlon's boat back over to the highlands where I found the dwarf I had saved. He had made a cozy shop carved into the mountain and sold some cool decorative items, much like the guild ledger. I said goodbye and returned to the valley where I potted around the farm until my ancient fruit wine was ready to collect. I shipped it off along with my strawberries and put my head down for a good night's sleep. It was another Tuesday on day 247. I made a pro gamer move by parking Sally up by the farm warp and used a beach totem to get to the boat quicker. I picked my ancient fruit, ancient fern and shrub seeds, and pineapple before warping back home, where Sally was waiting right there for me. Man, I should be a speedrunner. I had this route optimized. After picking the rest of my crop and dumping it into all 3 of my keg sheds, Sally and I rode down to Fairhaven Farm. I found Andy inside, who had made big strides in his hygiene. You know, when I think back to it, I paid a visit to Andy's farm and found out he's a Joja fanboy, and also a bit of a slob. I'm very glad he did. I was visiting because it was Andy's birthday today, and he loves butterfish, so that's exactly what I gave him. Back on the farm that evening, I didn't achieve all too much, to be honest. So on to day 248. Upon checking my mailbox, Andy had sent me 50 Joja Cola. So, thanks. All of my piggies were now fully grown and digging up truffles, which means I'll be adding truffle collection to my daily to-do list. However, today was the flower dance, so I headed down to the woods where I decided to ask Leah for a dance, who happily accepted, unlike Haley last year. And then it was time to boogie. Although I had my music off, so it made it kinda weird watching them dance in like total silence. Day 249 started with a morning boat ride over to Ginger Island. On the island farm, I planted the monster seeds around my spare sprinkler and left a couple of shrub plants there because, you know, why not? All I had to do now was wait for them to grow. And then it was time for everyone's favorite segment, Penning with Poxio! I spent a while penning, but today's episode came with a lot of excitement as, yes, that's right, I added a 3rd lucky ring to my collection. That night I went to bed and I dreamed about how awesome I am. It was day 250 and I spent the better half of the morning mooching around the farm completing menial chores. Sally and I then took off down to the beach where I caught Pierre just in time to hand him a rabbit's foot for his birthday. That afternoon I concluded I'd need a whole bunch of hardwood in order to fill my shed full of oil makers. So I took out all of my mahogany tree seeds and used this stretch of land I hadn't quite filled in yet to plant and fertilize some, which will honestly be way quicker than going to the secret woods every day. And then I stood still for a very long time. Day 251 I was back to Ginger Island. However, this time I beelined it to the forge. Once I got there I infused 3 rubies into my galaxy sword, which adds 10% damage per level, meaning it just does more damage. And I added the combat perk Crusader, which deals 50% more damage to mummies, ghosts, skeletons, and void spirits. And it also prevents mummies from reviving, which you'll see comes in very handy. I was tossing up between Crusader and Vampiric, which has a chance to heal you after slaying a monster, but I had enough money for food anyway, so Crusader it was. Afterwards, I took a quick bus ride over to the desert where I foraged for some coconuts and cactus fruit before finding Emily back on Ginger Island, for you see it was her birthday today, and I handed her some wool. Back on the farm, I collected up all of my truffles and decided to call it an early night. Day 252 was the final day of spring, and I started my day doing chores around the farm. Just before midday, I headed up to the playground and waited until the clock struck exactly 12 o'clock and received a giant Junimo plushie. I wonder if Apples would like seeing a massive size plush version of himself. Anyway, as the afternoon came and went by, I found myself running around the farm collecting ingredients and cooking in the kitchen. I thought it would be worthwhile making a start on the cooking collection. That night, I kind of fluffed around the farm with Sally, making sure everything was all in order for summer. The smell of summer was in the air on day 253, and I got to work scything down my dead strawberry plants. Sally and I popped into Pierre's where I bought a whole bunch of blueberry seeds, and back on the farm I filled up my crop fields with them. After finishing up some chores around the farm, I waited patiently for my wine to be ready, and when it was, I collected it all up, shipped it off, and went to bed after a very successful first day of summer. It was day 254, and while warping to the beach to make my way to Ginger Island, I found Willie on the pier. He showed me a legendary crimson fish he had caught, which honestly reminded me I needed to go catch one, so hey, thanks for that, Willie. I continued my day picking my ancient fruit and shoving them all into my kegs before taking a trip down to the Wizard's Tower. Here I bought 3 of the 4 obelisks. Yeah, that's right, I've been waiting for this day for a long time now. I can finally warp to the desert without relying on bloody Pam. Ah, today is a good day. Unfortunately though, I'll have to wait for my banana tree to be ready before I get the island obelisk. And for those who have never seen an obelisk before, basically they allow you to warp to different spots around the valley. They're essentially the vanilla version of what my Nexus is in the Expanded mod. That night I collected up my truffles and put them into my oil makers, as I have been doing every day now, and I headed to sleep. Day 255 was a very good luck day, and now that I had an obelisk to the desert, that's right, it's Skull Cavern time, baby! I was there, geared up with bombs by 7:40. Isn't this just so wonderful? I spent the whole day making my way down the caverns, putting my new sword enchant to work. This is gonna make the mummy monster slayer goal so much easier. After a day's work diving through the caverns, I had made it all the way down to level 101 with 274 iridium ore, 4 prismatic shards, and a bunch of other goodies. And then I passed out. I treated Sally to a new hat the morning of day 256. It seems that every time I get a new one, Sally must wear it. She is the official keeper of hats. We took off down to Marnie's to stock up on more hay. You see, to combat all 48 of my pigs eating food every day, I keep a whole bunch of hay on me so that I can refresh the silo every second day or so. I mean, it works though, so I'm just gonna keep doing it. Down at the beach, Alex and I tried playing catch, but we found out very quickly I'm just as good at sports as I am getting lucky rings. I then circled back to Marnie's ranch to give Jazz a fairy rose flower for her birthday, before returning to the beach to catch the crimson fish. It took me a couple of attempts, but I finally hooked one after hours of fishing. In-game hours, that is, not real life hours. On my way back home, I passed by the special quest board and once again picked up Sophia's Fairy Rose Garden quest, which I'm determined to not forget about this time. A boat trip to Ginger Island is how I started day 257. I made my way over to Mr. Key's Walnut Room and had a look at what challenges were up this week, and I accepted the 4 Precious Stones quest, which tasked me to drop off 4 prismatic shards, of which I had plenty back at home. So after a return trip back home, I picked up the 4 prismatic shards and dropped them back off to Mr. Key, and I was now 40 key gems rich. I took a look at what I could buy, and after a lot of thought, I bought the key to the town, meaning I could enter any house at whatever time I wanted, which honestly makes gift giving much easier later on. I had a quick chat with Leo before picking up a lone golden walnut that I had completely missed. Back in the valley and before bed, I got to chopping down some mahogany trees that had grown. I used the hardwood to make a few more oil makers and placed them down in my shed. Day 258 was Martin's birthday, so Sally and I rode on over to the movie theater where I handed him a rabbit's foot. While I was there, I stuck around to play the crane game where I went after another movie poster. I did fumble it the first time, but I got it on my last try. And you may be wondering, Poxil, didn't you miss the movie poster from spring? And to that I say, yes I did. Stop reminding me. I then decided to spend the rest of the day back in the Highlands to double check I'd explored everything. But I got infatuated trying to get this treasure chest, but for the life of me I just couldn't figure out how to get it. So I gave up and went fishing. I thought maybe I'd catch some cool fish from the Highland River, but unfortunately, I did not. So I headed home disappointed. I started day 259 by adding some more oil makers to my shed and saying good morning to all of my piggies. I then went along replanting all of the mahogany trees I chopped down before taking a trip to the Skull Caverns. For those wondering, I was here to slay some serpents, which is exactly what I did. I spent the rest of the day here and managed to knock off the serpent slayer goal before it got too late. First thing on day 260, I headed out to my fruit bat cave, which I had obviously not cleared out in a while. So after cleaning that out, I paid for a ticket and Willie took me over to Ginger Island once again. I wandered over to Key's Walnut Room where I picked up the Skull Cavern Invasion quest. This quest turns the Skull Cavern into hard mode, but with a few staircases, I'm sure I'll have no trouble. Back in the valley, I rode Sally into town where I passed by the special quest board and picked up Caroline's Island Ingredient quest, which tasked me to gather 100 ginger. So I guess I'll add ginger collecting to one of my many daily chores now. Of course, I then headed back to the island to gather up as much ginger as I could before returning to the valley once again to give Gus a birthday present, as it was his birthday today. Back on the farm that night, I mooched around the farm, finishing up some chores, smelting ores, collecting my ancient fruit wine, and shipping it off before heading to bed for the night. Day 261 was another Tuesday, so my morning was taken up with picking my ancient fruit and shoving them into kegs. And as monotonous as it may seem, my wallet keeps looking healthier week in, week out, so you know what, I don't mind. After all of that was done, I returned to Ginger Island to collect up my daily harvest of ginger, and then I just did some chores around the farm before heading to sleep. Day 262 was Maru's birthday, so Sally and I rode up to Robin's where I gave Maru a strawberry. Back at home, I started to make some progress on Sophia's fairy garden. The first thing I did was make 10 fairy dust with some fairy roses and diamonds. Secondly, I ventured back through my nexus to the Junimo village, as I vaguely remember them selling fairy stone. And lucky for me they do. So I grabbed 3 out of the 5 that I needed and headed back home. I quickly popped by Clint's to get some more gold ore since I was running a bit low, and spent the rest of the night finishing up some chores and smelting ores. It was the day of the luau on day 263, with countless iridium quality truffles at my disposal. I dumped one of them into the potluck soup, and call me bloody Gordon Ramsay because I was a master chef of the making with how good that soup was. Day 264 started off with another visit to the Junimo village where I purchased the final 2 fairy stone I needed for Sophia's fairy garden. Then it was back to Ginger Island for my daily ginger harvest. Slowly but surely I was getting there. You don't realize 100 ginger is a lot of ginger until you have to get 100 ginger. Back home, I put all the gold I had been smelting to good use by crafting another 12 crystallariums and adding them to my jadestone shed. And then for a good solid 2 hours, Sally and I just kind of stared out across my field of blueberries. Don't ask what's happening, because I honestly have no clue. But I finally got moving again, where I finished the day collecting the day's truffles, putting them into my oil makers, and heading to bed for sleepy times. Day 265 was another birthday. Alex's birthday, in fact. Hey, I may not be able to catch a football, but I give out good gifts. I then spent the day riding around in the rain with Sally, foraging far and wide throughout the valley, which included down at the beach, Sprite Spring, the Secret Woods, Cindersap Forest, and the railroad, which honestly took up most of my days, so... On to day 266. I started my day warping over to the desert and visiting the desert trader where I traded in 200 jadestone I'd been saving for 200 staircases. And then I popped into the Skull Cavern. I still had to make it to level 100 in the hard mode caverns, so I thought, hey, why not now? So I put my staircases to good use and started making my way down. Some would call this cheating. I call this being efficient. As I made my way down, I stopped off at floor 10 to slay some mummies and ended up completing another monster slayer goal, which only left me with one more monster slayer goal left to complete. A short while later, I made it all the way down to level 100. I collected my 40 key gems and headed back home. I quickly made my way over to Mr. Key's Walnut Room where I purchased myself Pierre's missing stock list. Now you may be asking why this over more fun items. Well, one item I needed for Sophia's fairy garden was fairy seeds, which Pierre only sells in fall. However, with Pierre's missing stock list, he sells all seeds all year round, meaning I'd be able to purchase them now. So back in the valley, I headed straight to him and handed over his missing stock list. I bought the 50 fairy seeds I needed, and I now had everything for Sophia's fairy garden. Sally and I quickly popped by Blue Moon Vineyard to put all the items in Sophia's chest, and the quest was complete. And hey, 35,000 gold ain't too bad either. And after a very productive day, I decided to head to sleep. Day 267, Sally and I headed back to Blue Moon Vineyard to see if Sophia had done anything with the supplies we'd gotten her. I then headed back on over to Ginger Island to gather some more ginger, and I accepted another quest. Since it was the start of a new week, a fresh pair of challenges were awaiting my acceptance. And funnily enough, the Skull Cavern Invasion challenge was back again, and for 40 key gems, It's an easy decision. One trip over to the desert later and I was back to diving down the cavern. As I staircased my way down to level 100, I made sure to stop off on any levels that had radioactive ore. This is a special ore that can only be found in the hard mode versions of the Skull Cavern and the mine challenges. It sells for quite a lot and I need some for the shipping collection anyway. But after a bit of time, I finally made my way down to level 100, collected my key gems, and headed back to the valley. That night on the farm, I collected up my ancient fruit wine and shipped it off before heading to bed. Day 268, of course, started with the weekly ancient fruit picking and kegging. And once that was all finished, I collected up my blueberries that my hardworking Junimos had picked for me to ship off for a bit of extra cash. Over on Ginger Island, I collected up my daily ginger. I'm getting close to 100, I swear. Before paying a visit to Mr. Key's walnut room. Since I had a few key gems to spend, I splashed out and got the horse flute. Now, I love the horse flute, and what it does is summon your horse no matter where you are, meaning Sally can join me in places outside of the valley. Back on the farm that evening, I finished up some chores and headed to sleep early, to be honest. Funny number day plus 200 was Sam's special day, so I surprised him with one of his favorites, a cactus fruit. I won't lie, today was kind of a nothing day. I did do some foraging up at the summit, I chopped down my mahogany trees and did some chores around the farm, but honestly nothing too exciting happened today. However, I woke up on day 270 with a special surprise. Mr. Key had sent me a golden piggy bank for earning 10 million gold, and I put it right next to my bed so every morning I wake up after dreaming about how awesome I am, I can be remembered about how awesome I am. I travelled over to Ginger Island where I collected the last ginger I needed for Caroline's special ingredients quest, shipped them off back in the valley, and the quest was finally complete. Oh my god, that took a while. Afterwards, I headed out for revenge. In my 200 days, I faced off against a void serpent 5 times the size of me, and I was humiliated. But not today, for you see, today was gonna be different. For today, I'd slay that serpent. Today, Camilla, we really have to stop meeting like this. With my tail between my legs, I returned home and I cried myself to sleep. Day 271, I was ready for a new day, and it started with a new crafting recipe in the mail. I'd gotten a solar panel recipe which allows me to get batteries from sunny days, meaning I wouldn't have to rely on Zeus for lightning, which will be nice. Also, my banana tree had grown and I was now collecting 10 bananas for the island warp totem. Too bad it only grows 1 a day, but hey, beggars can't be choosers. Up at Robin's, I found Maru needing help with some math questions, so I obliged and had a go. The first equation, I took an educated guess and I actually got it right. The second question, I took a random stab in the dark because I actually had no idea and I accidentally got it right. Genuinely, I was shocked. I was here to give Demetrius a birthday gift though, so that's exactly what I did. And for the rest of the day, I honestly didn't achieve all too much. So we're on to day 272. I took my prismatic shards and cinder shards up to the forge where I enchanted my pickaxe with the powerful enchant and my axe with the shaving enchant. Now the powerful enchant gives my pickaxe an extra power level, meaning it takes 1 less hit to break through ores. And the shaving enchant on my axe gives me 3 extra pieces of wood when chopping down trees and the chance for more hardwood when chopping down stumps. You could argue other enchantments are better, but you know, I like these ones. And then it was time for another installment of Panning with Poxil. Unfortunately though, I wasn't able to add another ring to the collection today. Day 273 started with a trip to the desert where I traded more jadestone for staircases. After my last few expeditions, I had used up quite a lot, so I thought it'd be a good idea to get some more. Down at Marnie's, I stocked up on more hay before visiting Galdora. Alicia was there selling some potions, and if I was going to take down that big waste of a space called a void serpent, I was going to need some extra firepower. One day soon, I'll take down that serpent. But for now, I popped by Clint's to buy a heap of gold, as I'm going to need quite a lot to fill my oil maker and crystallarium sheds. Back on the farm, in between smelting the gold into bars, I spent my time in the kitchen whipping up some meals and slowly adding to my cooking collection, which honestly took up the rest of the day. It was day 274 and the dwarf's birthday, so I rode to the minecart to the mines and handed him an amethyst. I then took the boat over to Ginger Island where I passed by Mr. Key's walnut room and accepted his hungry challenge quest. Now this tasked me to reach level 100 in the normal skull caverns without eating anything, but hey, good thing I've got those staircases, eh? Over at the island farm though, my monster crops had finally grown. So I picked them all and rushed to find Lance. His schedule said that he'd be at the Galdorian outpost, and that's exactly where I found him. So I handed him all of the crops and waited. But nothing happened, so I guess I'll just have to wait for something to happen tomorrow maybe? While I was in Galdora, I bought some more potions from Camilla in preparations for round 2 with Stinky Face before heading back home. It was a Monday night though, so I collected all of my wine from my sheds and shipped it off. Before bed, I managed to make another 18 oil makers, which I placed in my shed and finally went to bed. Day 275, the rain was pouring down as I collected my ancient fruit this morning, which, to be quite frank, was very lovely. After kicking all of my fruit, I headed over to Victor's place where I gave him a duck feather for his birthday. One boat ride later and I was back on the sunny shores of Ginger Island. I popped over to the island farm where I planted my beet seeds. Finally, back in the valley, I collected up my truffles and the day had just flown by, so I called it in for the night. Lance paid the farm a visit the morning of day 276 to thank me for the monster crops, and he said he'd left me a present in his outpost. But today was our old mate Willie's birthday, so Sally and I headed down to the beach where I handed him a pumpkin. Back on the farm, I laid out and fertilized more mahogany trees before gathering up my staircases and heading to the desert. I entered the caverns and got to staircasing down. I got quite lucky and stopped off on a couple of prehistoric levels to slay some pepperexes, but in no time at all I had made it all the way down to level 100, so I collected my key gems and headed home. To free up some chest space in my hub area, I ended up moving any clothing items I had to the dresser in my bedroom, and then I added 10 more crystallariums to the shed. Slowly but surely I was going to fill it up. I woke up on day 277 prepared and ready for revenge. I got all of my potions, travelled through my nexus to Galdora, and set out into the Crimson Badlands. After fighting off hordes of enemies, I found my nemesis stalking the boneyard, and I was going to make sure he would be the next attraction in said boneyard. I downed all the potions I could, and suddenly I was zipping around the Badlands like it was nothing. I dealt blow after blow to the serpent, retreating if I came close to death to re-energize. And then I got the serpent in a chokehold. He was stuck and I was swinging my sword so he couldn't turn on me. And as my speed potion ran out, I dealt the final blow, and he was slain. The rewards for my effort was a void shard. So back through the Badlands I travelled. It looked like it had some type of mystical power, and I'm sure Marlon will want to see this. So that's exactly where I headed. Up at the guild, I was met with concern rather than praise. It turns out that the corruption was spreading faster than we thought. So we took the shard to the wizard, who did some arcane analysis on the shard, but it broke. Bro, I spent so long trying to get that, and you just break it? Really? Magnus decided it best to take his findings to the ministry, but he said that I'd be rewarded for my efforts. And look, I'm a humble guy, so anything is fine, as long as it's nothing short of a huge gold statue of me. While I was around the guild, I decided to pass by the Highland Post, where Lance had left me a diamond wand. I tried it out a few times, and I won't lie, it's pretty fun. It like teleports the enemies away from you. But I don't see it being too useful. But hey, you never know. And after a long but very successful day, I headed home and finally to bed. Day 278 had a very different vibe to yesterday, that's for sure. Over at the Wizard's Tower, I purchased the Island Obelisk as I now had everything to purchase it, and I ticked off another goal. I used the obelisk to warp to Ginger Island, where I handed Leo a gift as it was his birthday today. I passed by Mr. Key's walnut room, where I used my key gems to purchase a pair of Junimo chests. They do work like ender chests in Minecraft. Basically, whatever you put into it, you can retrieve from the other chest. So I placed one on the island farm and one on the valley farm. That way, if I needed my tools for either farm, they'd be right there. That afternoon, I paid a long overdue visit to Krobus, where I purchased myself the Return Scepter for an eye-watering 2 million gold.
Oh, that's a lot of damage!
But look, it teleports me home. And between this, the 4 obelisks, my Nexus, and Sally, I could literally get anywhere in the valley in a heartbeat. For the rest of the night though, I kinda just stood in the rain, probably contemplating the meaning of life. Day 279, I was passing through town that morning and found Victor outside the movie theater. He told me he's finding it hard to be in the house with Olivia breathing down his neck about getting a job, and the fact he doesn't want to work himself to death in the city makes it hard to reason with her. So I told him that working at JoJo was awful, and I guess he can take what he wants from that. I was in town, however, to purchase some coal from Clint's, so that's exactly what I did. I then spent majority of the day foraging around the valley, sprinkle in moments of smelting ores and putting truffle in oil makers, and you've pretty much got the rest of my day. It was day 280 and I started the final day of summer with another trip to the Desert Trader where I got myself a bunch more staircases. I then popped by the movie theater to hand Claire a sunflower. Was it her birthday? No. I was just being nice. And then I spent the rest of the day back on the farm working hard in the kitchen, cooking up some Michelin-style dishes, slowly but surely adding more meals to my cooking collection. And as the sun set, I headed down to the beach, where, as I'm sure you know by now, we watched the moonlight jellies roll into shore. And of course, had an absolute rave to this absolute banger. Day 281, I walked out of the farmhouse, took in the beautiful colours of my favourite season, and said to myself, God, I love this game. In typical first of the month fashion, I got to scything down my now dead blueberry plants. After popping by Pierre's to buy a mountain of cranberry seeds, I headed back to the farm where I got to planting them all down. Afterwards, I took off to Ginger Island where I passed by Mr. Key's walnut room and accepted another prismatic shard quest. And I harvested my beets since they had finally grown. I raced back to the valley where Sally and I rode on over to Lewis's house and planted them in his fridge. While I was there, I passed by the special quest board and picked up a quest from Andy, who was asking for some help to build a cellar. And before I could head off, I found Sophia ecstatic over her new fairy garden. And honestly, I couldn't help but be happy for her. And then I was back to the quest. Over in the desert, I placed a solar essence into the dragon's mouth and was told my reward was located in the log pile by my house. Because of course it was. So I warped home where I received my exclusive club card. I'll go visit sometime soon. For now though, I spent the rest of the evening making truffle oil, collecting up my weekly lot of ancient fruit, and shipping it off for that sweet, sweet gold. Sophia paid a visit to the farm on day 282 to let me know she was very happy with the fairy garden, and she repaid me with an updated ledger, meaning I could now purchase iridium sprinklers and nozzles. As cool as that is, I think it's a little too late. But hey, the thought was there, and that's what matters. Today was also Penny's birthday, so off to town I went where I gave her a lovely poppy. Over in the desert, I put my brand new club card to use by kicking this bouncer out of the way and entering the casino. I didn't hang around for too long though, because silly me had forgotten it was a Tuesday. And I quickly ran around collecting all of my ancient fruit before shoving them all into my kegs. That evening I finished up a few chores and decided to call it in for the night. I wanted to knock off another goal on day 283, so I took my stack of staircases to the desert, threw on some monster musk, and started my dive down into the caverns. After a while I stumbled onto floor 76 and got to slaying as many pepper Rexes as I could. And a short while later I knocked down my final Rex and completed my final monster slayer goal. Back on the farm, I found this very satisfying. And I popped by the Adventurers Guild just to double check all the goals were actually complete, and I collected my rewards from Gil. And seeing as I had required a new hat, I of course gave it to Sally, the almighty keeper of hats. I reserved day 284 for another episode of your favourite segment, Penning with Poxial, with special guest Sally. You feeling lucky today, Sally? My thoughts exactly. Well, unfortunately, today was another unsuccessful session, so no fourth lucky ring today. Day 285 was Elliot's birthday, so I started my day with a trip down to the beach to hand him a duck feather. Back on the farm, I decided to chop down my mahogany trees since most of them had grown, and got to work collecting everything Andy would need for his cellar, which included 500 wood, 75 hardwood, 500 stone, and 15 iron bars. And once I had everything, Sally and I rode down to Fairhaven Farm, where I dumped them into Andy's chest. Speaking of, I found Andy shortly after walking around trying to find some forage. We talked overlooking the river, and he said that he was proud of me. That afternoon, I added 8 more oil makers to my shed and did a few chores before calling it in for an early night. I started off day 286 looking at my shipping collection and shipping off a few things I haven't shipped yet. Afterwards, Sally and I ventured around the valley foraging everything I could find for a while. And I'm gonna be honest, I didn't do anything too interesting for the rest of the day. So we're on to day 287. It was our new friend Morgan's birthday, and I heard he likes void eggs, so that's exactly what I gave him. Over at the movie theater, I handed Claire another sunflower and played the claw game where I picked up another movie poster to add to my collection. And back in the farmhouse, I added it to the wall of posters. If only I didn't forget the spring one. Down at Marnie's, I bought some heaters and circled into town to buy some parsnip seeds from Pierre's. And then I headed on over to Ginger Island. I planted down my parsnips as I only needed one more golden walnut from farming, and it was killing me that I didn't have it. Riding along the beach, I saw an artifact spot, so of course I dug it up and Holy cow. I swear this series just gets even luckier. That is now one of 2 snake vertebrae that I need for Professor Snail's museum. I did find another artifact spot nearby and thought I could get super lucky, but it wasn't meant to be. Back in the valley, I popped by Clint's to open a few golden coconuts I'd been hanging on to, where I managed to get the fossilized skull, another part of Professor Snail's museum. So of course I ran it back to him on the island. And then I finished the day off putting the heaters I'd bought into my pig farms. It may not be winter for a while longer, but hey, better now than never. Day 288 was a Ginger Island kind of day. Before I left though, I handed Claire a sunflower as she got off the bus because it was her birthday. That's not creepy, right? And then I headed on over to the island. I got myself a couple more golden walnuts, completing Professor Snail's island survey, looked around for some more artifact spots, and fished in the dig site river where I got a fossilized spine. One quick trip to Snail's tent and I handed him the spine, leaving me with just the second snake vertebrae to finish the museum. Back over at the dig site, it was once again time for another installment of Penning with Poxiel, with returning special guest Sally. It was another unfortunate day today though, as I couldn't add more lucky rings to the collection. That night though, I did place a banana on this pedestal where a gorilla came out and traded it for 3 more golden walnuts, and I finished my day back in the valley collecting up my wine and shipping it off. I won't lie, day 289 was an admin kind of day. I collected up my ancient fruit wine and dumped them all onto my kegs, collected some jade stone, bought a prismatic shard from the Junimo village, went to Elliot's book reading, dropped off an artifact to gun through the museum, I stocked up my silo with more hay, tended to my slime hutch and made some more truffle oil. All before heading to bed after a long day full of chores. Day 290 started with a wee bit of a whoopsie. I may or may not have forgotten to press record until halfway through the day. But you didn't miss too much. All I did was hand over 4 prismatic shards to Mr. Key to complete that quest, and while I was there I accepted another Skull Cavern invasion quest, which leads us to right now. I made my way down the caverns, collecting radioactive ore when it was close by, and a short while later I had made it all the way down to level 100. Back home I made and collected some more truffle oil before heading to sleep. It was Jodie's special day on day 291, so I rode Sally through the rain to hand her a diamond. I quickly popped by the island farm where I picked up my parsnips and finally received the last farming walnut. And after a stop back home I returned with some strawberries seeds which I planted, because you know, why not? Back in town, I was passing by Blue Moon Vineyard, and Sophia decided to tell me about her parents, who sadly passed away. And she was the one who was left to take over the vineyard. So I said I'd come and help her sort out all of these boxes tomorrow, because I'm a caring person. Impatient, but caring. All I did on day 292 was a bit of fishing. I caught myself the angler, the final legendary fish, and the kitty fish, which I caught over by the West Bridge. Although I didn't have space in my main tank for the angler, I had to make his own little tank. Day 293 was spent giving Abigail a birthday gift and smelting gold. That's about it, to be honest. I started day 294 with another trip to the Desert Trader where I got a whole lot of staircases. And then back in the valley I had to take over the till at the movie theater for a while. Claire wasn't feeling well, so I thought I'd help out. Afterwards I finally headed to Sophia's to help her unpack all of her parents' boxes. Shortly afterwards we got a cute little cutscene of Sophia walking through the town absolutely loving life, and I think that's super wholesome. That afternoon I found myself back in the rain on Ginger Island where I purchased the island travel system with some spare golden walnuts I had. From day 295 to 299, it was honestly pretty standard stuff. I gave out birthday gifts and completed chores around the farm. On day 296, I re-kicked all of my ancient fruit and rushed so quickly to the Valley Fair that I completely forgot to get things for a Grange display. Over days 297 and 298, I went around the valley collecting secret statues. Scarlett also showed up at my door on day 298, asking her to visit her in Grampleton. So if that's a thing, I'll have to save that for 400 days. And on day 299, I found another golden walnut in one of the oyster clusters and added 14 more oil makers to the shed, which finally puts us on day 300. And as is tradition, I spent the day soaking in the spa reflecting on the last 100 days. As I enjoyed the hot water, I was ready to finish this series and vowed to reach perfection in the next 400 days. So there you have it, 300 days of Stardew Valley Expanded is finally complete. Like I said, I will be finishing this series in the next 400 days, so make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on that. If you have made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and as always, you're all wonderful people, so have a wonderful day, and thanks for watching. I then circle back to Marnie's ranch to give Jazz a very rose flower.